Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind. The January 6th insurrection. Democrats have spent the last 3 years attempting to convince the American people that the events of January 6th were an insurrection organized by Donald Trump, an attempted coup and overthrow of the US government. And even beyond that, Kamala Harris said that January 6th was worse than Pearl Harbor and 9/11. And some people I've heard take it even further. Some people have claimed that January 6th was worse than 9/11 and Pearl Harbor combined. The worst thing ever, right? That's the Democrat narrative. Of course, that's the left-wing talking point. Nancy Pelosi's precious narrative. The question is, did it land? Well, apparently not so much, as we now have another former Capitol Police officer coming out publicly, not only not declaring that January 6th was worse than 9/11 and Pearl Harbor combined, but actually flat out even refusing to call it an insurrection. So far, that's coming from the former Capitol Police chief present on the day, and now a former Capitol Police commander. Their precious democracy narrative is falling apart. Let's have a conversation about it. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so take a look at this article here from the Conservative Brief. Capitol Police commander present during January 6th says, quote, "It was not an insurrection." A former Capitol Police lieutenant who was present during the January 6, 2021 incident at the Capitol building and who ordered the House and Senate to be evacuated pushed back hard on critics of then-President Donald Trump and their description of what happened. In an X post on Thursday, the former officer, Tariq Johnson, noted that he's been saying publicly that January 6th was not an insurrection, but not many people would listen, which was a reference to 2024 GOP presidential contender Vivek Ramaswamy's comments during a CNN town hall event in Iowa a day earlier. Ironically so, no one would benefit more than I if January 6th was an insurrection, as I was the commander that ordered and led the evacuations of the Senate and the House during the J6 breach, after begging former Assistant Chief Yogananda Pittman for permission to do so, as she sat comfortably in the Commander Center, watching the events unfold on CCTV footage, while Chief Stephen A. Sund was obtaining National Guard approval and getting assistance from local law enforcement agencies. His post continued. That's an interesting one that I haven't heard before. Assistant Chief Yogananda Pittman, supposedly sitting comfortably in the command center, watching the events unfold. I wonder if that command center has something to do with the magnetic doors being unlocked and opened. Remember this very suspicious clip? Maybe Yogananda has some answers for us on that one, huh? He then continues, Yogananda Pittman flat out ignored me, so I was forced to forge ahead with the evacuations without obtaining approval from her, Johnson's post continued. 3 days later, I decided to call Senator Patrick Leahy to report Pittman's malfeasance, and approximately an hour after I got off the phone with the senator, I was contacted by USCP Internal Affairs and informed that I was suspended. The suspension lasted for 17 months and I was under USCP gag order not to speak about the events of January 6, 2021 to the media until I separated from the department. He wrote, I was also required to remain in my house Monday through Friday from the hours of 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and unable to step off my property without notifying USCP for fear of being disciplined up to and including termination during those 17 months. These are some of the many facts USCP Chief J. Thomas Manger, who is arguably the most corrupt politician in the country, was brought in to cover up. If presidential hopeful Vivek Ramaswamy would like more facts to disrupt the insurrection narrative, I will inbox his designated representative. My personal phone number, God bless our country now and in 2024, he concluded. Now that's a story we've never heard. So here's a former Capitol Police commander who was literally the guy escorting Congress out the building. Not only is that guy claiming that it wasn't an insurrection, but he's claiming that there was something extremely fishy the day of, where the supposed person in charge of the command center went completely MIA, and when he reported issues about said person, he was instantly suspended, hit with a gag order, and essentially forced into house arrest for 17 months. That is insane. And this is exactly why Nancy Pelosi's narrative is falling apart so swiftly. The more we learn about January 6th, the more questions and the more confused we become. And I think that's essentially been indicated in all the polling data. I mean, you can fact check this for yourself. I'm not even going to bother going through the effort of going over the polls over the last 3 years because I just know it to be true. If we look at polling data starting from early 2021 to now, we continue to see a softening view on January 6 from the general public. And speaking of polls, I think the general sentiment is probably best described through this poll. National Poll finds growing belief that, quote, it's time to move on from January 6. Or this, 61% believe feds helped incite Capitol riots. Supposedly, a large majority, over 60% of the population, believes the feds incited the events of that day. So obviously, sentiment has shifted dramatically the more information people get access to. And what that means is Nancy Pelosi's little precious narrative, Liz Cheney's little precious narrative, is falling apart. That's why we're seeing Liz Cheney currently panicking on CNN, only popping up for a media tour out of nowhere the moment newly elected Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson promises to release more January 6 footage.
He's now the Speaker of the House. He's number 2 in line for the presidency. Do you think that our democracy is at risk with Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House?
I do think that we have to be very concerned about the fact that he has shown a willingness to take steps that he knows to be wrong in order to placate Donald Trump. And that was the thing that surprised me the most, I think. I had not understood that that was Mike's character. I thought that he was a man of character and a man of honor. But when I watched again and again and again throughout this period, his willingness, essentially to do things without any basis in law. And it wasn't just me. I talk in the book about Kevin McCarthy's own chief legal counsel, who herself confronted Johnson about the flaws in his arguments, and she emailed me and said he knows he's wrong, and yet he was continuing to do it anyway. So when you have somebody with that approach, who's the vice chair of the Republican conference, you can make the case it's not as dangerous. I was obviously concerned enough about it that I wrote these parts of the book before he was Speaker. When you have somebody who's willing to do that, who's Speaker of the House, it really does, I think, present a significant threat. And you imagine January 6, 2025, when the new House is counting electoral votes. Imagine the possibility that the election gets thrown into the House. And I think it's important that he not be the Speaker that day.
Apparently, all of a sudden, Mike Johnson poses a significant threat to democracy. And what she means by that is anybody who gets in their way of building their precious narrative is going to be labeled a threat to democracy, because it's basically option number 1 in the deep state playbook these days. Anybody who doesn't fall in line as a little Washington puppet is a supposed threat to democracy. And apparently, this former Capitol Police commander was a real threat to democracy as well, for simply asking a question relating to the incompetence of their security response on January 6th, and so much so that they slapped him with a gag order and put him on house arrest for 17 months. But I guess at this point what I'm asking myself is, what's the Democrat play going to be in 2024? The whole democracy thing isn't really working out so well. Bidenomics, they already threw that one in the bin. Abortion, a little bit old. Defund the police, didn't age well. Donald Trump's a Russian Manchurian candidate, totally exonerated, not exactly sure what's next. Although, to be honest, they're probably just gonna revert to the whole Donald Trump is literally Hitler thing. At least until they find something better. What an absolute farce, and just thought you guys would be interested in this one. If you were and you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, friends, and I'll see you on the next one.